Hi, welcome back to the weekly dance tutorial. I'm Can, and today's tutorial is going to be a request from Josh. Josh asked, how can we move our spine with our limbs? So today I'm just going to be focusing on the arms, and you could kind of get an idea of what to do with your legs based on what I'm going to tell you. So let's start by figuring out how to move our spine. So pretend like your hip is kind of like the base of a joystick, right? You have these really old joysticks that have a little base right here, and there's like a stick right here that you can move, right? So it's kind of like an arcade, right? And pretend that stick, the joystick, is kind of like your spine. So let's say if you tilt it this way, your spine will go this way, and then go back to center, go to this way, back to center, forward, right? And then you have back. Okay, so let's move our spine this way, and then this way, this way. Here we go. 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom, 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 forward, back, back, forward. Okay, now let's do a rotation really quickly. So here we go. Boom, like that. And back. This is kind of like a stretch as well. If you noticed, I'm stretching out these areas right here just by moving and focusing on my spine and my core. Okay, so you could do rotations with that. Think like a joystick, so you have a lot of options. Okay, so boom, 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 and don't forget about your shoulders too. So your shoulders kind of go hand in hand with whatever's going on with your core. So you could leave your shoulders as they are, or you could shift your shoulders, right, to get a different effect. So for example, if you go to the left, my right shoulder is up. Okay, so let's try going like this, but switching our shoulders. Okay, so this kind of helps counterbalance this side, right? Because you have your hip over here that's not doing anything. It's kind of weird once all the weight's falling this way, so you want to kind of go like that, right? Just to shift it and make it a balanced picture. I'm not saying balanced like in terms of your actual weight, but more of like the lines. So for example, if this is the middle line, right? If I go this way, you have something over here, and you have nothing over here because your shoulders dropped, right? So you want to fill in this space with that extra shoulder, right? I mean, it also doesn't matter if you do this, but it also is not going to look as balanced as doing this, right? So going here, go forward, and this time, instead of going like this, I'm popping my chest out, because if you turn to the side, right, if I just go like this versus this has a different posture, which also means that it's gonna appear different in the front. So if I go like this and lean forward, right, I want to keep my chest out and counterbalance my hip in terms of like spacing. So you can go boom, chest, this way, right? So now it's still a joystick, but instead of it going around like this, right, like tilting all the time, it's going in a more straight circle. So you have those kind of movements with your spine. Okay, so boom, 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 or boom, 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 boom. So another way to look at it is, instead of a joystick, you have a bottom shelf right here, which is your hip, and it creates like this circular shelf. And then you have the top half, which is your torso. And you could think of those as literal shelves, like rectangles, right? 2 rectangles stacked on top of each other, and they're moving independently from each other. So you can be like your hip, right? Chest, or chest, and then hip. See that? So 2 different parts. So you could move this in a circle, and you could move the bottom part in a circle as well. So this is going to be the top shelf. Okay, which is just this area, and then you have the bottom part, which is your hip. Okay, so those two sections can be independent or they could work together to create different movements. So that's just the spine area. So what do you do with your limbs as you're moving your spine? So right now I'm just letting them hang loose. Okay, that's one thing you could do because it'll naturally kind of fall into place because it's just a straight line going down, right? Another thing you could do is, let's say if I'm tilting to the side, boom, just like we did earlier with our shoulder, instead of lifting the shoulder, you could actually just lift your whole arm. See that? So this adds on to this space over here, and it still balances out your hip area, which is over here. So if you go like this, right, the opposites are kind of symmetrical. Okay, so you have something over here, something over here. Does that make sense? So right there, right, if you switch it over, same thing, boom, boom. And now there's a line of balance right down here, okay, versus it being in the center. So I want to shift that line, right? So this way, if you go forward, right, you could put something back here in the back area, or you could do something up front. So you can go boom with your limbs. So you can go back here, okay, and if you turn to the side, it creates a different shape, right? So you could be like boom, like that, and your limbs could do whatever you want in this area right here if you go forward. See? And you could play with the space that's behind you, because once you lean forward, there's nothing over here, so you could fill in that space, right? And down here you still have your hip going, so your hip is already covering this spot, and then whatever you do with your legs, it'll just be a natural kind of movement, because with your legs it's kind of like walking. If you're walking with your left foot out front, your right hand's gonna come out to balance it, right? That's for like movement and walking. So if you notice, if you pay attention to people walking, everything's gonna be opposite movement, right? If this hand's out, the other leg's out. If this one's out, then this side's out. So that's a really good teacher, because that's just natural balance happening every day. So with dancing, you could do the same thing. And let's say you lean back, right? So for example, you could put your arms forward if you're leaning backwards. So here's an example: push, and then you actually can do this, right? If you push and move your hands into the front area, if for some reason feels right to do something in front when you're leaning back, so like that. See that? Even when people go and snake, like if you notice, when you snake this way, something's happening over here. If you snake this way, something's going that way. And you probably see this a lot, right? That's a part of how your spine moves with your limbs. It's just kind of like balancing each other out. So a couple of things you could practice is just the core movement of where you position yourself, right? And everything that's happening with your legs kind of follows what's happening up here. So you can't see this right now, but if I go this way, this knee over here is bent. So if I'm leaning to the right, my right knee is bent. If I'm leaning to the left, my left knee is bent. Okay? So boom, boom. You shift your weight naturally with your feet. Okay? And if anything up here goes that way, your other leg should be reaching the opposite direction. See that? I don't know if you could see this, but if I reach out this way, my other foot's gonna come out, right? Boom, 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 boom. It just looks a little more natural, but you can also experiment now that you know how to balance certain things. You could experiment unbalanced movement, which is kind of interesting as well. So for example, if I'm leaning this way, and for example, I usually would do something over here, right? So if I lean this way and I'm doing something over here, you could also do the opposite and go like that. See? But if you go like this and then you do something here, it creates like a completely different picture, but it also feels unbalanced. It feels a little more awkward if you try to do that and do something over here versus doing this and just going this way, right? So play around with that extra space that's empty once you move away from it, okay? So whatever the rule is, wherever you go with your upper half, wherever you went, fill that empty space with something, and then go this way and fill this empty space. And that's the tutorial. It's a bit different than what I normally teach, but it's also an interesting thing to look at, which is just balancing yourself and balancing your movement out and trying to see the relation between what your arms are doing versus your chest and your torso. So there you go. Have fun with that. Try to explore and create some interesting movements. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me at can.poriotics. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the Patreon yet, please go ahead and do so because you'll get a lot more tutorials like this one. And if you're already subscribed, thanks. And I'll see you next time.